Welcome to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, brought to you by Pilma. This podcast helps lead lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Here is your legal marketing expert and host, Ken Hardison.
Well, hello, everyone. This is Ken Hardison, and welcome to another episode of Grow Your Law Firm. And today we have the honor and pleasure of having Howard Ankin, super trial lawyer up in Chicago area. Welcome to the show, Howard.
Thanks for having me, Ken.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your law firm, and then we'll get more into the nitty gritty. But I just want people to understand who you are and what you've accomplished.
Yeah, just generally, I'm a third generation lawyer. But when you say third generation, it was my mom's dad that was a lawyer, and my dad was a lawyer. So I'm the firstborn son and the firstborn grandson in my family. So in my mom's world, I was going to be a lawyer, and other people say like they found the law based on some life experience or some special class they had in high school or something like that. I kind of out of the womb, I'm doing today what I guess was expected of me or what I thought I was going to do my whole life.
Yeah. So you practice in the Chicago area?
Yeah, so my office is right in the bullseye of the loop. Unlike other lawyers, I own my own building here. We have an 80,000 square foot building at 10 North Dearborn. So it houses multiple other law firms that are co-counsel law firms to mine. And my law firm, we have 3 floors of this building, got about 100 people here, concentrate on, what they say nationally are single event cases. But, we also do some mass tort stuff also. So we do workers' comp, products, medical malpractice, your auto and trucking accident cases. And then also just to make sure that we provide full service to our clients, we do Social Security disability also.
Good deal. Good deal. So out of that 100, how many are lawyers? How many are staff?
So right now we have 25 lawyers. So we're about, 3 for 1, 3 assistants for every 1 lawyer. What I like to say to everybody in the elevator pitch is, I do everything in-house. So I could have somebody that, has an injury case, has a third-party cause of action, needs Social Security disability, maybe there's a products or medical malpractice. So I can combine all the issues that I need to maximize a client's recovery under one roof, instead of having to refer it out, or instead of a client not getting a certain recovery that they might need. And we often have meetings here to discuss how we're going to put our settlement language together, or how we're going to combine our efforts in order to maximize the recovery for a client.
Yeah, I used to do that too. That's my 3 main areas. I didn't do med mal, but I did negligence claims and workers' comp and Social Security disability. And I think especially if you're doing workers' comp, Social Security is kind of important, because if you settle a workers' comp case, you got to be careful about the Social Security, about your clincher agreement, whatever they call them in Chicago. We call them clincher agreements. We had to be careful the language we put in it, or it could affect somebody's Social Security disability, if I remember correctly. I don't know if that's still the case.
From a practice standpoint, yes, you got to make sure that you know what the language is that you're putting in those settlement contracts to get it right. But also in the business side, or helping a client, you tell a client that you're going to get X number of dollars as a lump sum, and they're not that excited about it. But then when you throw in the Social Security aspect of it and you say, hey, you're going to get this lump sum in your workers' comp case, but then you're going to get this amount of money every single month for the rest of your life. 2.5 years later, you're going to get, Medicare for the rest of your life to cover your medical. And all of a sudden, they're very excited about the result of their case. Yeah, so as you say, whether it's in Illinois or anywhere, combining Social Security with other aspects of an injury recovery, the clients love it, and it definitely provides them a full recovery.
So it sounds like, when you, how long you been practicing?
So I was licensed I started Ankin Law on March 31st, 1997. And I was licensed November 6th of 1993. So it's coming up on 33 years.
Yeah. You must be doing something right if you build it up to 25 lawyers. What do you think, like 2 or 3 of the keys for you of growing this law firm?
Well, every day is a new adventure, and you're in this law practice. You're only good as you were the day before. And really now that, we have private equity money or whatever coming into the marketplace, and AI and so on and so forth, this practice is moving as faster than it's, ever moved. But with that, the best thing that I could say is there's probably 10 years of my life that I lost somewhere along the way. As a young lawyer, I was working, like when people say they were working 15 hours a day, I was working 15 hours a day when I first started. So long story short of that is I tell the young lawyers in my office, I'm like, look, everybody just says, hey, just give me the big case. And when you give me the big case, I'll handle it. It doesn't really work that way. And, if you're on trial and you're in the middle of the firefight, there's no time for you to be able to look over and figure out how to practice law at that time. So at some point, I think for any lawyer to be successful, obviously, some people are luckier than others, but if you know what you're doing and you know how to practice law, some will do better, some will do worse, but everybody will do okay that knows how to be a good lawyer. There's always room for another lawyer that knows how to help people. And I guess
Yeah,
long-winded on that one is I always try to make it that I'm a lawyer first. That's just like my attitude about everything. So there's probably other lawyers that are going to be a lot more successful than me, but I take it from the standpoint of, yeah, if I do that, I may not get as much compensation or I may not make as much money or so on and so forth. But as a lawyer, it's the right thing to do. So if I look at everything from the standpoint of just doing good lawyering, again, I think it's always about doing right and it's always about the money. But I think I'll make the money and I'll be happy with what my career looks like, when I do a look back, 20 years from now.
yeah. And what I found, Howard, when I first started out, it was all about the money, all about the money. But then I kind of matured a little bit and started thinking, I really got this mindset. Everything we do should be for the betterment of our clients and treat them like it was your mother or your grandmother. And when you do that, I just saw the money come. I don't know about you, but when you do the right thing, like you said, do the right thing, do right by your client, word gets around and you get more cases. And I don't know. I think it's some karma. Maybe I'm crazy, but I just feel like when I quit worrying about the money came. If I just worried about the client's interest, and like you say, I'll never forget, I was at this party one Christmas and this PI lawyer, yeah, I just settled this case so I could buy myself a car for Christmas. And I'm thinking, you proud of that? I mean, did you sell it short? I mean, I don't know. I didn't ask him, but I said, why would you? It seemed like very crass to me. I not the lawyer I would want to hire. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. I just think it's I think you hit the nail on the head. I think young lawyers should be thinking about this, and even older lawyers. I mean,
So on the same note of that, I'll say to you, Ken, I heard you talk like 8 or 10 years ago, and there was something that you said, when I heard you speak like 8 or 10 years ago, and it still resonates with me today. But I was like a young lawyer, and maybe had like 10 or 15 people with me at the time. And, I was walking up and down like the, LaSalle Street, like the main avenue of downtown Chicago here. And I was picking up all the old timers, picking up all the back of the file drawer cases from all the old timers. I was constantly on trial, working on everybody's stuff, paying co-counsel fees or whatever. And I thought like, hey, I was going to be trying all these cases and really getting a reputation out there for, building up my practice and everybody would know how good a lawyer was and so on and so forth. And you said this, that it was like, but then there was like the lawyer that advertised and marketed his practice. And no matter how much I was, working 15 hours a day and killing myself, I still wasn't getting like that first phone call that was coming in. I was still going to pick up the cases off of the back of the shelf of everybody else's file drawer to try. And what you said really resonated with me is I think it's a push and a pull. You got to be a good lawyer, but if nobody knows that you're out there and you're not marketing or advertising your business, other people that are half the lawyer that you are, they're going to be stealing your lunch and getting the cases that you should get. So
yeah,
it was around 2008 for me, 2007, that I, really made a little bit of difference and started marketing and advertising my practice. And that's when it really, like the combination of advertising who I was, but then doing that, but then working hard, those two things together really made a difference for me. But anyways,
Yeah,
that was your advice
yeah,
to me.
I remember
I
that. I
was
mean,
already doing it, but you spoke to me.
yeah, yeah, I think, yeah, and it's like I've told people before, if the good lawyers don't advertise, then, and only the bad lawyers, guys that really don't know how to try cases or whatever, then we're not serving you're doing a disservice to the public. You know what I'm saying? They need to have a choice and have somebody that knows what they're doing like you, that can go get big verdicts, and that the insurance companies respect, because we all know that the insurance companies know they grade lawyers just like, they know who to respect, they know who they're scared of, they know who won't go to court, they know who they can push around. I mean, they do it, they know it. I mean, they keep files on it. I mean, I've talked to claims managers, and they do. It makes a difference on what they pay on who the lawyer is, and I'll never forget, this is in 96, John Morgan. I was down there he had about 25 lawyers, Howard, about the same size you are now. And he asked me a question. He said, if your mother got her leg cut off in a car accident, would you recommend your law firm? And I couldn't say yes. And he said, until you can say yes, you don't have the law firm you should have, because you've got to be that. If you can't do it, you got to have some lawyers that can do it, that can ring that bell, and that you would trust your mother's case with. That like what I said to you, that run with me, it's been 96. So however long that is, over what, 30 years? I don't know. However long it is, 30 something years. But yeah. So when you started marketing, what was your big deal? Were you doing online marketing, TV, grassroots?
Well, when I first started, I guess I had telephone page ads, that's how
Yeah,
long ago it was.
yeah,
And I got to be honest, the telephone book for a long time was a good source of business when it was there.
yeah.
And I also think for lawyers, it was a good cost effective way to do ads. On a side note, I think, this day and age, what's happened is for lawyers, we have so many middlemen people that have come into the marketplace that have tried to take over the marketing and the advertising for the lawyer, that it's really made it much harder for the lawyer to, make a living, because there's so many people that are, looking for the lawyer's advertising dollars. And it really takes up a lot of overhead for a lot of lawyers that are, the initial groundwork of trying to get the business in. So I don't know. I transitioned really from the telephone book to where I started advertising on one or two local stations. And I really think I just picked like two local stations that were the right ones. So I got lucky with my first two picks as to far as those go. Now I'm on cable, I'm on radio, I got billboard. I'm out. I try to anytime that I can, make a speech anywhere. I do a lot of workers' compensation, so I got a lot of union halls, make a lot of speeches. I'm on a lot of law boards, so I'm out as much as I possibly can to be the face of my firm, talking about, whatever we're doing. And then, anytime we get a result, anything that we're doing here, we do a lot of social media stuff. So I'm always trying to promote on social media, anything that we're doing.
Well, you've been doing this a right good while. And we had our summit last week, and I did a speech about, the big trends that are changing the way we practice law. I don't know about you, but the last 5 years, 6 years, I've seen so much change, more than I did the first 30 that I practiced. I mean, what do you think the biggest changes are that have occurred in the last 5 years that are going to occur in the next 5 years? What do you see the big deal?
So it's actually funny because one of my people was actually at your summit. And so, I had a lot going on last week at work, but they kept texting me about this, that, or the other thing. And like all your great, like all your like tidbits of wisdom, they kept texting me being like, Ken says this, and this is what's this, you know. So I was kind of having a back and forth exchange on that, while the summit was going on last week. I just really think, due to people like yourself, like when you said John Morgan before, there's been like a lot of great thought leaders like yourself that are out there that have basically marketed to people like myself to basically say like, look, this is what you should be doing to promote your career. And I would say is for a while there, I think like people like myself that got in a little earlier when I was doing this 20 years ago, yeah, it was a little bit easier because not everybody was doing the marketing and advertising. Now what's happening is there's a lot of lookalikes to you and a lot of other groups that have done mastermind programs or whatever. So like your wisdom has now like people have there's a lot of copycats of you that have now taken over. And so what's happened is now it's every lawyer is that way. It's everybody's doing marketing, advertising. It's no longer special. So one of the problems is there's just a ton of competition, a real lot of competition. With that competition,
Oversaturate, yeah.
yeah, and with that competition, you're no longer advertising, you're no longer competing against the law firm that's across the street, down the block, the other side of the courthouse. The competition now is coming from Florida and Texas and Arizona, and you're not even worried about your colleagues from across the way that you see at the courthouse anymore. The competition is really national at this point. And so that's difficult. The reason is that I really think what they did in Arizona, or what they did in Utah, where they created a sandbox, or where they said in Arizona that you could now have non-lawyers come into the marketplace. I really think now, we have that private equity money that has come into the marketplace. I don't really know what people are, other states, the ethnicity of how all this works. I really don't know that the law community is able to keep up with what's happening. So ultimately now we have these groups that are out of Arizona that are competing with everybody. We have all new technology, and it's really like the wild west practicing law. And that's really like what the issue is. So if you really want to get long-winded on that one, when I was growing up in the community that I grew up in, it seemed like all like the good-looking, wealthy, popular girls, all their families, their dads owned pharmacies. They all had like a local pharmacy here or there, and people came and they made their money with the prescriptions or whatever they had. Got your toothpaste at the local pharmacy, and it always seemed like kids in my high school, those were the ones that had the nicest houses. Okay. Years later, those same families had ended up selling out or closing their pharmacies to CVS, Walmart, and other type of national chains. And those girls' parents, they ended up working for Walmart. And the trend that I see is I just see lawyers, they're going to be working for like the Walmart or CVS of law firms if the trend continues, because everything will be owned by private equity. Like at some point you need to have a little bit of independence to be a lawyer, to do what you need to do. And if somebody starts saying to the lawyer, you absolutely have to do it this way, that way, or the other way, I don't know. I just think it's going to be the beginning of end for justice for people. It may not be by the time it ends my legal career, but the trend towards my children or my grandchildren, that the lawyers are going to become the pharmacists of my youth.
And I think, but I have seen some pharmacies survive this, like little local mom and pops, but they have to differentiate themselves, just like the Walmarts. I remember when Walmarts came to, I lived in a town of 10,000 people. Everything was local mom and pops. Then when Walmart came, some of them closed shop, and then some of them actually thrived. Very few. I think that's what's going to happen with law firms. I think that people like you, Howard, that are smart and are looking at, know how to grow the firm, know how to, you compete with these 800-pound gorillas. I think you'll survive. I think the problem is going to be these little 1 and 2 man shops or 3 man shops that they don't know how to differentiate themselves. They don't know how to combat all this money being spent on TV and online marketing. I could be wrong, I think it definitely is going to, I call it Darwinism. The strong will survive, the weak will die. They'll get eat up, just like you said, by the big law firms like Morgan. And these other ones, Jacoby and Myers, and these other ones, Finkelstein. I mean, and especially with all this money coming in. But I think it is going to change things. But I think people like you are going to be okay. I really do. I might be wrong.
I'll tell you what I'm really worried about, Ken. I'm really worried about two things in the profession that's going to really be the profession's demise. One of those things is, I put a lot of time and effort in my life. I'm, part of the Illinois trial lawyers. I'm governor for the American Association for Justice. I'm the president of my law school's alumni association. I do a lot of work for the Illinois State Bar. I do a lot of volunteer, a lot of time, and more importantly, I donate a lot of money. So, for example, like workers' compensation, it's a statutory right of recovery. What we vote in our state legislature in Springfield, what we say the law for workers' compensation is going to be, that's it. So, like wherever people are watching this nationally, if the speed limit outside the front of your house is 25 miles an hour, it could be 15 or it could be 40. It's all just depends on what they vote. It takes lawyers, and it takes lawyers who care about being lawyers to donate their time and their money to basically say, we need the law to be this way for it to be fair. And there's other interests, business interests, so on and so forth, where they think the law is going to be fair and they think our society and our world is going to be better if we do things this way. This is what I'm worried about. When we get the bean counters in, okay, where they're caring about the bottom line for how much that law firm is going to be making. And they forget about the fact that as lawyers, when somebody says to me, Howard, why should I hire you? I tell people, I've already been representing you. I already represented you long before you got here. My work that I have with the bar associations, the cases, my case law that I've made that's established the ability for you to get a permanency award, I've already been helping you long before you came here. So you may like that other ad or whatever else somebody's telling you, or however you're getting pushed to come here or there. I've already been your lawyer. You should want me. But again, it gets back to nobody really knows what the consumer doesn't know what they're talking about. Anyways, my point being for you, Ken, is what I'm worried about is I don't know that these groups that are coming out of Arizona and how they created, the sandbox in Utah. I don't know that these organizations, okay, are set up where they're putting people and giving credit, okay, for actually doing the hard advocacy work, okay, to keep the right to trial by jury alive. That's where it needs to go. And there's a lot of lawyers that are putting their time and effort into this, but as they matriculate out and they get older, is the next generation of lawyers going to come in and really understand what really needs to be done, okay, to make it that an injured person can get the recovery that they need. That's my one concern. And then my second concern is, like in the state of Georgia, they just went through, massive tort reform there. And like you hear about it in some of these places, where California, they went through massive tort reform 10 or 15 years ago. When these places go through these massive tort reform and then they move to other states, then they kind of like ruin what's happening in that state. Like you hear these, whether it's true or not, I don't know. I don't practice in the state of Georgia. Here in the state of Georgia, everybody has to get a back fusion. Nobody wants that. You need the treatment. So anyway, like if they take the road show now of everything that everybody was doing in Atlanta, that in Georgia, that caused that state to have tort reform, and now they bring that road show to like Illinois and other states, it's also like the beginning of the end for injury law, how it needs to be to protect the right of people that are injured. Maybe it will be that way, maybe it won't, but making sure that they keep the private equity money out, keep the bad actors out. That's really, I think, something that will be, much better for society. The individual lawyer that uses his own money for his own marketing and advertising, that lawyer knows what he's doing with his marketing and advertising dollars. When it becomes about the money, it becomes about something else.
I agree with you. And I've seen states where they've gutted workers' comp to where lawyers just wouldn't even do it because like they cut the fees so much that you really couldn't even, unless you just want to be a pro bono law firm. I mean, I think I saw Ohio did it one time, Florida did it, and then they changed it back. Looks like, and I hate to say it, but it's politics. I mean, that's what happens. One good thing for you, I think, maybe I don't follow politics as much as I probably should, but it seems like to me Illinois is kind of a pro-democratic state for the most part. And when I practiced in North Carolina, it's red now, and we had contributory negligence. 1%, you got nothing, which was a killer already. And then they added these other things, several years ago, and then they tried to limit workers' comp. Used to, we could get benefits for life unless they could find them a suitable employment. But now it's got to be a catastrophic case. When it's cut off at, I think, 200 or 400 weeks. I can't remember. I think it's 200 weeks. I can't remember. So you see things like that happen. And you're right. I mean, it's like, well, we gave a lot of money to the local North Carolina Advocates of Justice for lobbying. And actually, I think what's happening now is I talked to somebody from North Carolina, and they actually got a bill passed by the Republicans to raise the insurance limits. And they did it by using that lobby money to lobby Republicans instead of just Democrats. So maybe things are changing, maybe they're not. I agree with you. That worries me. Yeah. I'm worried about the fact that if you go out to Arizona, you got this hedge fund money in there, and they're spending $2 or $3 million in North Carolina on online marketing, which is easy to do, right? And I'm having to compete with that. And then they have a token lawyer that they've hired in North Carolina, so they can say, we have a lawyer in North Carolina. But most of the time, they're referring the cases out to lawyers, and they want 50% of the fee or whatever the deal is. So I don't know what state bars are going to do about that. I don't know if y'all have talked about it up in Illinois. Seems like to me the state bars could put some kind of limitation, at least some guardrails up anyway, for these firms out of Arizona.
Yeah. Ken, you touched on something which I think is also an excellent point that you made. When I got out of law school, which was in 1993, and I was already working as a law clerk at that time, people were talking about somebody that had an automobile policy and they were fully insured in the state of Illinois. Fully insured was a $100,000 policy. That's going back over 30 years ago. So what I'm saying to you today is, people are still getting, sold the same $100,000 policy that they were getting sold 30 years ago. And, like in some states, like the policy limits for cases might be, I don't know, $10,000 in some states. It's never moved. Nationally, like if you have a trucking policy, minimum $750,000. Whether on a national level, state level, what have you, the insurance companies keep selling automobile policies at such a low level, that's also going to ultimately, end up being like the demise of, injury law, or being able to get people fairly compensated, because there's just not enough money. And for people that aren't buying uninsured motorist policies, that's just really like what the problem is. So the costs are high. Costs are high to have to have the right type of lawyer. If we don't get policy limits increased, on trucking and on cars, it's not going to matter anyway. A $100,000 policy today, or a $100,000 policy 30 years ago, that same value of money, probably worth about, $35,000. So no matter what happens, people really aren't getting, full compensation right now unless we get these policy limits increased.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, the 750 was that way for truckers 30 years ago. It's been that way forever. I mean, I remember that when I hadn't practiced in 15 years, and it was way early in my practice, it was 750. I mean, that hadn't changed. You would think, well, 750 is a lot. Well, not really for a truck. I mean, most of the time, I'd say over 50% of the time, these trucking accidents are pretty severe, and people either get killed or they get catastrophic injuries. So yeah, 750 doesn't go a long ways. Most of the time, their medical bills while they're in the hospital is that much. If it's a bad accident, bad injuries.
Used to be that people would have, you'd have a policy, you have like $5,000, $10,000 in med pay coverage that covered all your medical, and then everything else was for your, pain and suffering or your permanency. Now
Yeah.
you're using up the whole policy just on your medical bills.
And I would tell all the lawyers out there, and I've done this, and I'm sure you have. I mean, go out and get you for yourself. We talk about we want to get good limits, but get you an umbrella policy. They're cheap. Like get $10, $20 million. Whatever you're worth, always try to get twice as much. I mean, you can get these things for a couple $1,000s. If you got like a $500,000 or $1 million coverage on your automobile and your house and all this stuff, you can get an umbrella for 10, 20 million, a couple $1,000s a year, at least no more than 5,000, and it'll protect you in everything you work for so hard. I don't know. I mean, you agree with me on that?
Yes and no. I mean, I totally agree that you need to have it to cover yourself from a liability case against you because everybody's going to be coming for you. The other way though is sometimes like you could buy like $1 million umbrella, okay, and then maybe you could buy like your $10 million umbrella on top of that. But my point being is for your uninsured or underinsured motorist coverage,
Yeah.
they won't let you buy more than $1 million. So
Yeah.
for your own self, you get hit by somebody that has no insurance or small insurance, you got a catastrophic injury, even for yourself, you can't even insure yourself for more than $1 million.
Yeah, that's true.
There's a problem. I'm talking about like if when the truck hits us.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying to you is yeah, this not having enough how we work insurance policies, this all needs to be changed. But definitely going to like umbrella.com and buying as much as you need to cover yourself, you gotta have it. No question.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So you said something at the beginning that you own your own office. So when did you do that, and why did you do that? Because I've heard different arguments both ways. I mean, I could argue buy your own building or not buy your own building. So why did you do it?
Today you hear a lot more about people that are, selling parts of their firm, or, they're selling, they sell their phone number, they sell like other things about it. So they're able to sell their firm. It was something that like people never really talked about before. I just always thought for me, like if I had a client that owned like a corner liquor store or what have you, all of a sudden, 30 years later, that corner that becomes like, the corner that in the neighborhood that everybody wants to live in. So I just thought for me that if I, paid myself my own rent, you know, wake up 30, 40, 50 years later from practicing law, and I'd have something, I have an asset that I wouldn't have already had. The other factor with that is for me, I found by having my own office, I'm able to expand my office as quickly as I needed to. So it wasn't like for me, I needed to wait. Like my lease is coming up in 2 years, so I'll get more space, and then I'll have to try to like figure out how much more space I need, or so on and so forth. It was always nice having my own office because I was able to grow my law practice because I own the space to be able to do it.
Yeah,
Connor Valley. Yeah,
it's a great little
Connor,
retirement
yeah, it was good.
deal because like you're saying, you're building equity in something, and if you ever did get ready to retire, you've got that building you could sell or lease, have income, passive income, either way. And I like the idea. I think what you did was smart is that you bought more than you needed. And I'm sure what you do is you got these leases with other lawyers or other people because you've got 80,000 square feet. How many? You said you got 3 stores. How many stores is the building?
I have 11 stories. I got 80,000 square feet. I will say to you though, Ken, it's like as a lawyer, you always outsmart yourself. The post-COVID world, I never expected that, now people are working from home, everything's a mediation, a Zoom call, deposition online, so on and so forth. So where the world is going to head, I don't know. I personally feel like If I have people in the office, it just seems like things happen. Like you're able to teach your younger lawyers, you're able to have conversations, you're able to, you could always call somebody or get them on the phone, but I think like you can move on a dime and make stuff happen. People are learning, there's an energy by having people in the office. But even with that, people like working from home, the expansion of where people live and flexibility and work-life balance and, wanting to be with children. So with that, a lot of my people here, they still work 1 or 2 days a week remotely. So I really feel like overall in the law business, I don't know that we're going to go complete remote, but what I think there's like a shrinking of the size of the office that people need. A lot of like moteling where people share an office or they don't need as much space because they just don't have people in definitely people aren't coming in all weekend anymore. That's for sure. That was something that 30 years ago was like Saturday was like a Tuesday. You went to work.
So what's the last book you read?
The last book I read was a book that my wife's aunt gave me, which was just like a quick read. Why can I not remember the name of it? But it was basically a parody almost on Donald Trump in Florida, and they were all like in Palm Beach, and it was just a story about how they were like having these. I don't even want to get into it. It was just a story about like the Palm Beach community. It's a quick read that I read on the beach for the over spring break.
What's the best business book you ever read that helped you?
I think the book Good to Great, I think is really good. I think it explains a lot about how you can be good, but how you're going to be great. I think I learned, a lot from that. I don't know, any of these business books that you read, I used to read a lot more of them I feel like 10 years ago, try to understand more about like what's happening. And I think there's always, something to take out of it. I think there's a lot of good trial lawyers that have written books about how like they've grown their practices and they've talked about how, things that they've done. So like I was saying to you before, Ken, there's always like something that somebody says where they have something really positive that they're able to say, and it just kind of like sticks with you. So I don't know. I say to people, if you listen 100% of what I say, take the 10% that you like, get rid of the 90%, but there should be something that you could take of it, even from a conversation like you and me are having, that people will use it and help make some changes in their life for the better.
Well, listen, I have enjoyed this. Time's running out. In fact, we're over time, but I enjoyed talking to you. It was fun. And congratulations on building a good firm and not giving up the professionalism. And I like the way you practice. It's all I think you'll survive. I know you will. The John Morgans of the world, all this hedge fund, you're going to do fine.
I appreciate you saying that, Ken, because I got to tell you, like every day is like, every day.
Just don't change. Just don't change. Keep doing what you're doing. I really believe that.
They keep making it a little bit too hard, but I don't know. The alarm goes off at 5:30. I'm still excited to get out of bed. I'm just getting a little nervous that there's going to be one day where they're just going to make it too hard for me. And I'm going to be like, I don't know anymore, but we'll see.
Okay, my friend. Well, thank you so much. Howard Ankin from Chicago. Great insights today. And I appreciate you. Until next time, this is Ken Hardison, dedicated to your success.
You have been listening to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, the podcast that leads lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Go to growyourlawfirm.com to find more ways to market and manage your law firm. Please leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts.